Math 1, Unit 7, Angle Pair Review. Use the diagram to decide whether the statement is true or false. The measure of angle 1 is equal to 47, then the measure of angle 2 is equal to 43. That is false. The 2 should add up to 180. The measure of angle 1 equals 47, then the measure of angle 3 equals 47. That is true because vertical angles are congruent. Number 3, the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 3 equals the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 4. That is false. Those guys are vertical angles. So 1 and 3 are vertical, so they should be congruent. 2 and 4 are vertical, so they should be congruent. The measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 4 equals the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3. That is true. These two guys, 1 and 4, are supplementary. 2 and 3 are supplementary, so that is true. Number 5, make a sketch of the given information. Label all angles which can be determined. Adjacent complementary angles where one angle measures 42 degrees. Well, adjacent complementary angle means two angles that share a side and are complementary, which means they add up to 90 degrees. So if this guy is 42, this guy has got to be 48 degrees. Number 6, non-adjacent supplementary angles where one angle measures 42. So we could have this angle right here being 42 degrees and this angle over here measuring 138 degrees. Those two angles are supplementary and they're non-adjacent, not connected. Number 7, congruent linear pairs. Okay, a linear pair is a couple of adjacent angles whose sum is 180 degrees. If they're congruent, it has to be two 90-degree angles. Vertical angles which measure 42 degrees. So vertical angles, you just draw two lines that intersect. And we'll say 42 degrees and 42 degrees. Vertical angles are always congruent. For questions 9 through 13, use figure 1. So the measure of angle DBE plus the measure of angle what equals the measure of DBC. So that would be DBE plus angle EBC equals the measure of DBC. Number 10, name an angle adjacent to ABD. Well, we've got angle DBE or DBC, but both of them have to start with DB because that's where am I there? ABD, they have to share the BD there. So I'm going to say angle DBE. Number 11, name the sides of angle EBC. Well, that's easy. It's two rays. It's ray BE and ray BC. All right, number 12. If the measure of angle ABD is 7x plus 3, and the measure of angle DBE is 9x minus 21, and the measure of EBC is x minus 6, then find x, the measure of ABD, DBE, and EBC. Well, what do these three angles have to do? They have to add up to 180. So it's 7x plus 9x is 16x, plus one more is 17x. 3 minus 21 is negative 18. Negative 18 plus negative 6 is negative 24. And that should all add up to 180 degrees. I'll add 24 to both sides. I get 17x equals 204. Divide both sides by 17. and we get x equals, what do we get there, 12? X equals 12. Okay? Alright, so now that we have x, we can solve for the measure of angle ABD, which is 7 times 12 plus 3, which means it is 84 or 87. We can find the measure of angle DBE, which is 9 times 12 minus 21. 9 times 12, what is that? 90, 108. 108 minus 21 would be, what is that, 87? And the measure of angle EBC should be 12 minus 6, so that would be 6. 87 plus 87 plus 6 equals 180, so it works out correctly. Okay, is ray BD a bisector of, let me get that back up there so you can see it, is ray BD a bisector of ABE? And that would be yes, because this is 87 degrees and this is 87 degrees, so obviously DB cuts it in half since they are both congruent. And we could say angle ABD is congruent to angle DBE. Number 13 is BE. If BE is a bisector of DBC, the measure of DBE is 8x minus 5, and the measure of EBC is 5x plus 16. Well, if BE bisects this angle DBC, means it cuts it in half, means this angle and this angle have to be congruent. This is a new question, so you can forget about these. But we know these two guys are congruent because BE is a bisector. So we set the two equal to each other. I will subtract 5x from both sides. I get 3x. I'll add 5 to both sides. And I get 21. Divide both sides by 3. I get x equals 7. Find x. We did that. Find the measure of ABD. Well, the measure of angle ABD is, okay, well, it's the whole thing. It's 2 of these guys. So I'm just going to go 2 times 8, but instead of x, I'm going to plug in 7 minus 5. Okay. So 8 times 7 is 56 minus 5 is 51, and if we double it, we get 102 degrees. Okay, that's a very possible test question right there. So you're going to have to find the measure of the smaller angle and double it to find the measure of the whole angle. Alright, these are very possible test questions, so you'll notice that some of these things have x's and y's, so you got to be smart on how you match them up. Like, I want to match up x's with x's. Well, what do I know about these two things? They're vertical angles, which means they are equal. So I'm going to set these two things equal to each other. So that's 15x minus 1 equals 13x plus 9. Subtract 13x from both sides. Subtract it from this side, it cancels. Subtract 13 from 15, we get 2x minus 1 equals 9. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. We get 2x equals 10, which means x equals 5. Okay? So if we want to do the same for y, we can set these two guys equal to each other. So I'm going to say 2 times 3y minus 25 equals 4y plus 2. I set these two equal to each other because they're vertical angles. And I get 6y minus 50 equals 4y plus 2. I'll subtract 4y from both sides. Gives me 2y minus 50 equals 2. I'll add 50 to both sides. I get 2y equals 52. Divide both sides by 2 and we get y equals 26. So we found x and we found y. So the nice thing is we just have to find one angle. So 13 times 5 plus 9. Well, 13 times 5 is 65 plus 9 is 74. The nice thing, if this is 74, this guy is 74. You can plug it in and figure it out for sure if you want. If this guy is 74, this guy's got to be 106, which means this guy is 106. Because supplementary angles, vertical angles, supplementary angles. Okay, moving on to number 15. Well, this time you'll notice the x's are right here. So instead of setting vertical angles equal to each other and ending up with x and y's in the same, this time I'm going to add these two together and set it equal to 180 because they're supplementary. Which means 17x plus 10 equals 180. Subtract 10 from both sides, I get 17x equals 170, which means x equals 10. So 4 times 10 plus 10 is 50 degrees. 13 times 10 is 130, and you can see that those two are supplementary. All right, so I could add these two guys together and set them equal to 180 and solve for y like I did down here. But you know what? I know that 2y minus 30 equals 50 because it's vertical to this guy or it's supplementary to this guy, which means 2y equals 80 when I add 30 to both sides. When I divide both sides by 2, I get y equals 40. And by the way, 40 plus 25 is 65, and 65 times 2 is 130, so look at that. Moving on, find the value of x. These are vertical angles, so I know 2x minus 3 equals 85. Which means 2x equals 88 when I add 3 to both sides. Now I divide both sides by 2 and I get x equals 44. Again, these are vertical angles. So 6x plus 2 has got to equal 3x plus 71. I'll subtract 3x from both sides, leaving 3x plus 2 equals 71. I will subtract 2 from both sides and I get 3x equals 69. Divide both sides by 3 and I get x equals 23. Okay, if angle C and angle D are complementary, complete the following, write an equation, solve. Okay, so C plus D are complementary, so that's 3x plus x minus 6 equals 90, which means 4x minus 6 equals 90, which means 4x equals 96 when I add 6 to both sides. Divide both sides by 4, I get x equals, what do I get, 24. If x is 24, then 3 times 24 is 72, and 24 minus 6 is 18, and 72 plus 18 is 90, so it works out. Number 19. If E and F are supplementary, complete the following, write the equation to solve. Okay, so E and F are supplementary, so 5y minus 3 plus 2y plus 1 equals 180 this time. Combine like terms, we get 7y minus 2 equals 180. I'll add 2 to both sides, which gives me 7y is equal to 182. Divide both sides by 7. Y equals, well, 7 goes into 18 twice with 4 left over. 7 goes into 42 6 times, so y equals 26. Now solving for E. We get the measure of angle E is 5 times 26 minus 3. Well, 5 times 26 is, what is that, 200 and, let's see, 230, 0, carry the 3, that's 10, I'm sorry, 130. And minus 3 is 127. Well, if these two guys are supplementary and this is 127, this guy has got to be 53 degrees. And 2 times 26 is 52, plus 1 is 53, so it checks out. Okay, last one. If angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles, complete the following. Okay, vertical angles we know are congruent, because that's what definition of vertical angles. So that means x plus 10 equals 2x minus 7. If I subtract x from both sides, I get 10 equals x minus 7. I'll add 7 to both sides, and I get 17 equals x. Now finding the measure of angle 1. The measure of angle 1 equals 17 plus 10, which is 27. And we know angle 2 has to be congruent. But let's just check it out. The measure of angle 2 equals 2 times 17 minus 7. The measure of angle 2 times 17 is 34 minus 7, which is 27.